lot of people out of work right now.
And they got a lot of volunteers, but they only have so much room. And what's happening, that there's going to be a tremendous restructuring of the National Archives in October because they're expecting a 35% budget cut. Right now, the talk is the service records of the Civil War are staying in D.C. and the pension records are going to St. Louis. You're never, if you want to do a soldier search, you better get it now before October, or you're going to have to travel the entire country to get it. And if you've ever tried to deal with the archives in St. Louis, there's definitely a black hole in the United States. Because that is it right there. And you know they had a fire in '73. And it destroyed most of the World War II service records. So, I love going to the archives, but you can imagine I'm a little opinionated now, right? I'm on my soapbox, I apologize. Any other questions?
When you have letters, I've got some that were written, when you fold them out, they're much bigger than normal, even legal size.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get the plastic sleeves to put those in that are oversized?
I don't know it right offhand. Call Kennesaw Mountain Battlefield and ask to talk to the archivist, Amanda, and she'll be able to tell you where to get those special sleeves that are enlarged, that won't have the acid, that won't destroy them, and she'll be able to tell you exactly where to get them. I do not know right offhand where to get those, but she'll be able to tell you. Just ask to talk to Amanda.
Okay.
Sorry I didn't have the answer for that.
That's fine.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head when the 1940 census is going to be released? What month next year? Because it'll be released in 2012.
Yeah, from what I heard, it was April.
April?
That's what I heard, that it was going to be April. We get a lot of those on microphone.
Is anybody doing what you have done on the Union side? Is anybody doing the same thing on the Confederate side that you know of?
Not that I know of. I'm kind of been trying to do a little bit when I find something. If I'm down at the state archives and I happen to come across a letter or something that you know, might help. But the problem with the Confederate cemetery in Marietta is there was wooden headboards put up as these men were buried, and there was such economic depression in Marietta after the war, and it was till 1902 before a ladies' organization got together and started to actually take care of the Confederate cemetery. So all those wooden headboards were gone, and they had a hospital log sheet, but they didn't have it arranged on the burials in the cemetery. And then after the Battle of Cobb Farm, those men that died were brought back and buried in the cemetery, and then you had the men that were dying on the Kennesaw Mountain line were being brought back. And there was such chaos in Marietta during that time period that the hospitals had filled up. Where the Marietta Museum of History is, that was a large hospital site. And then you have the Fraser home up on the hill was used as a hospital site, that they were filling up so bad after the Battle of Chickamauga that the trains were coming in and unloading the wounded soldiers in an open field where the Crystal's Hamburger is today, and the Mill Street parking and the other sunken Mill Street. Those were all actually used as a triage area. Julia McClatchy was 15 years old. She lived right across the street down Whitlock, about 3 homes down Whitlock. Her and her mother would actually rip up bed sheets all day long and get up the next morning and bring them over to where the Confederate wounded were. And there was no tea. There was no way to have tea, so her mother broke bark off a tree, boiled it up so that the soldiers would have something of flavor to drink. One morning, they walked over. Mother was carrying the teapot. She was carrying the ripped up bed sheets as bandages. And she said, Mother kneeled down next to a wounded soldier, and he had a head wound with a bandage around his forehead. She lifted his head up just to give him a little bit of tea. He wouldn't take it. It dribbled down his cheek, and before she could have laid his head back on his blood-soaked stretcher, he had died to be buried in the Confederate cemetery as an unknown. And I kind of tell you, it's just You know, the organization, they didn't have it, they didn't have the resources. And of course, in 1902, they actually, you know, started working on the Confederate cemetery. In 1908, they rededicated it. They put the monument in July 17, 1908. And really started to clean it up. The Ladies Memorial Association has handled it for many years, and now it's turned over. The upkeep is to the city of Marietta. And I was just in a meeting in Marietta today to plan the Civil War activities that are going to happen over there for the next 4 years. And I got to see the first sketches of the new monuments going into the Confederate Cemetery. They're really going to be great. It's going to be a mother and a child statue that's going to be right by Powder Springs and the entrance to the Confederate Cemetery. And it's going to be like the mother and the son coming to visit the dead husband and the father. And then there's going to be 3 statues up on the hill, up by the monument, of 3 ladies. They're going to represent the 3 ladies that have been very important to the historic preservation of the cemetery. And each one is going to tell the great story about it. Have you been up there to see it since they put in the new monument? Yeah, they got a great new monument. It's a big marble box with empty boots on top. And then they put up 2 walls like the Vietnam Memorial. And they have the name of every Confederate soldier that they know was buried in the cemetery. They don't know what grave he's buried in, but they do know he's buried in the cemetery. We need to do a field trip sometime.
Sounds like a great one.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Are there Confederate cemeteries up north by the prisoner camps up in Illinois? and places
Johnson
like that?
Island has one, and where the prison camp was there. Elmira has just been overrun, and it's very small. You got Camp Chase in Ohio that has a pretty substantial cemetery there. Let's see, Elmira, Johnson, Douglas. They just moved them out and transported them here in the South. And am I missing something? Yeah, I don't know where those are buried. But Johnson Island and Camp Chase are the 2 that really still have substantial graves that are preserved so you can see it. They've done an archaeological study at Johnson Island now. They've done an incredible study up there, and they found some great artifacts up in that area and actually documented the actual grave sites, which hadn't been done in a long time. Yes, sir.
Is there any way to get DNA samples from the grave?
You know, in the national cemeteries, the VA will only do it if a family requests it. The Confederate Cemetery is a public one, so I'm sure if you had a sense and had the money, you know, I'm sure that they would do it. But you got to imagine it's a lot of, you know, it's a tough road to kind of go down on the moral aspects of it, digging up these graves, and you know that. I think that's why the family of Benjamin Franklin Dumas is struggling with whether to have him moved or not.
Yeah, and it's also symbolic. Back together. The Union was saved. Why not leave him where he is?
You know, that's what Henry Green Cole wanted when he sold the property. He wanted it to be a place to bury Union and Confederate soldiers. But all the citizens of Marietta said, no, we got our Confederate cemetery, and we don't want our brave heroes to be buried with them there Yankees.
That's what it was.
So, yeah, it's a unique kind of situation. Any other questions? Well, thank you for having me. And I do have copies of my book if you're interested in buying a signed copy.
Okay.
It's the one, Rest Brave Comrades, Your Work Is Done. And the title comes, the 17th Army Corps Hospital was in the Masonic Hall in downtown Marietta. And when these men died, these Union soldiers died in the hospital, they were taken a half-mile south of Marietta, right adjacent in front of where the Confederate Cemetery is today. In fact, the new bridge in Highway 120 runs right where it is today. And I got a description of the cemetery, and it said it had a picket fence around it with a wooden arch leading into it. And on the arch, someone had engraved, "Rest here, brave comrades, your work is done." So that's where I took the title of the book from. And you actually get the Julia Holland story is in there, and the Edwin Weiniger story is. And to tell you a little something more about Edwin Weiniger, when I pulled up the pension record and found the letter, it really struck a name really quick. Weiniger's not a very common name. And we had a drummer boy named Anthony Weiniger that was reenacting with us from the time he was 11 to 17. Then he went to college, and now he's lead ranger out at Kennesaw Mountain Battlefield. As it turns out, that's his great-great-grandfather. He was killed on the battlefield where he's now lead ranger. You don't call that something. That's amazing. Did you have a question, sir?
No.
Yes, sir.
When we were down at Andersonville, I think, we got an explanation of why the Union headstones are round and the Confederate ones are pointed.
Is that true?
Is that true?
So, tell us.
Well,
You don't want the lazy Yankees
sit on the Confederate headstone, so that's why they made it.
Oh, no. True? And is that true, or that's an anecdote?
No, that's true. Yeah, one of the Confederate Veterans magazines that I was reading from 1893, I think it was, they actually noted that that's the way Confederate headstones would be done. And it was the actual United Daughters of the Confederacy, Georgia Kent, that actually had written that up, that Confederate headstones will be pointed.
That's interesting. In Milledgeville, in the cemetery, the town cemetery, there's a lot of Confederate service buried in one area. And they have marble, oh, maybe they're not Confederate, but they're rounded like this. They're all the same.
Well, what happened was in 1903, the VA and the federal government approved that they would pay for Confederate headstones. So you had to send in an application through the government processes to get headstones, and a lot of those rounded headstones that you will see will be post-1908.
Okay.
Where they actually requested a federal headstone, and it was placed, but it had the information for the Confederate soldier.
Right.
And the rounded
are
ones
all exactly the same. They were all same time.
Right. So, and there was one lady, when I was going through the records, she lived in Vicksburg, Mississippi. She filled out at least 2,000 requests for headstones for Confederate soldiers. And when they were going through it, they were finding out that she was double requesting for the same soldier 4 or 5 times just to get headstones sent out. So.
You can do the cemetery and then you will do some soldiers.
Yeah, and since I've gotten some notoriety from the TV show and the work I've done, I've had people call me from all over Georgia saying, we've got Yankees buried in our cemetery. And, you know, some of them you kind of think, well, there is some truth to it. And, you know, I was telling Leslie that I've got one at the Babb Cemetery near Lovejoy, in the Lovejoy station, and it seems pretty credible from the attack that happened on September, and the men that were killed, and what we were looking at. And I was going to see if you wanted to do a project and do a study down there, because the story is there's one officer that's buried completely in the cemetery, and then there's another officer that his head's in the cemetery, and the rest of his body is out of the cemetery. And the family said, the family's owned this property since before the Civil War, and they still own it. They had said the reason that their grandparents had done that was because they said the Yankee had his head in the right place, but his heart in the wrong place. And that's actually on a plaque right by the entryway. So we're going to see if we can convince you maybe to come down, if we can get permission, and do a study to see if it's actually the truth.
I mean, there's like I've got 2 different burials. Body's buried here and the head.
Well, no,
Oh, the line.
you know, here's the
boundary.
entryway to the cemetery,
Yeah.
and the marker is just inside the cemetery, and supposedly he's buried
Right.
kind of coming out of the...
Yeah.
Because I thought the same thing when they first told me the story that they had decapitated.
You're familiar with that grave, I guess you've seen it.
Mhm.
What's its orientation? It's the same orientation of all the other graves?
Well, the way it is in in the
I mean,
research.
East West, or,
Yes.
yeah, it's the same.
Mhm. That's why you kind of put some credence to the information. There's been enough built around research, and maybe it could be true.
Yeah.
But the director of the National Cemetery in Marietta, superintendent, said that if it is true, that these are two Yankees that are buried there, and the families don't want them in the cemetery anymore, she'll open the cemetery back up to have them buried, which would be kind of a unique event. And, yes, sir.
Now, serious question, one maybe a little less than serious. When do you anticipate this History Channel 10-part series being on?
Okay, History Channel didn't buy it. The Military Channel bought it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Military.
it's going to be 10, because you know the History Channel is not so much history anymore.
Well, that was going to be, my joke question was going to be next.
Yeah.
It was going to be, were they going to force you to include any alien involvement in it?
Well,
10-part
what
history?
happened is the Wayans family, Damon, Keenan Ivy, you know, Living Color and that, their sisters actually live in Atlanta and saw one of the TV things that I had done and about my research, and they fell in love with it. And they called me one day and said, you know, look, Brad, we want to do a show, just one show on your work and talk about these men. And I said, well, that'd be great. Well, we get a whole family, the whole Wayans family gets on a conference call. Well, 20 minutes later, by the time we hung up, they wanted to do 10 episodes. And I'm going, oh, this is really good, you know. And so they put everything together and came up with a name and the presentation they were making to the studios. And they thought they'd go to the History Channel first. So we went up to New York and did our presentation. And the History Channel said to us, sorry, that's not within our demographics.
Oh, wow.
No kidding. Here's one of the most incredible history stories you can tell, historically accurate and documented. It's not within our demographics. So we went the next day and actually presented it to the Military Channel. They had all the meetings and they signed 10-part. And the thing is, they said if the viewing is good the first year, they want to do 5 years.
Wow.
What was the last part you said?
They said if the viewership is good the first year, they want to turn it into a 5-year series.
Okay. When do you think the first one might be on then?
Well, we're actually working right now on some of the logistics stuff, and they're projecting us to start filming in April of next year.
Okay, so it'd be sometime,
September, there's probably late fall of 2012.
so good way yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're a good ways yet. I wouldn't be here if we were anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Because you
I
can
was just
imagine my
surprised
days would
'cause-
be 15 hours a day.
Because the History Channel doesn't do a lot of history anymore, so.
Are you watching Larry the Cable Guy? Pawn
That's the
Stars.
reason I was asking, because if somehow you had come up with some indication that there might have been some alien involvement in this cemetery, and I figured they'd bought it.
Yeah, you know, the strangest thing was going into the History Channel offices and doing the presentation and sitting there and hearing, you don't fall within our demographic.
Civil War.
Yeah, and luckily, Michelle, Damon's sister, actually put her hand over my mouth because she knew what was coming up next. Brad, be calm. Because we had talked on the ride up to New York about all the kooky shows that they have on the History Channel, and Michelle knew exactly how I felt about the History Channel. And you know, they got a big write-up in the, I think it was a Washington paper, and talked about some of the stuff they were going to do, and you know, they're now called the Not-So-History Channel,
Yeah.
called according to the Washington Post, which is a shame, you know, because my TV never left the History Channel for many years. Now it doesn't go to the History Channel.
It seems to me that at one time, a few years ago or whatever, that it was good.
Yeah,
But that's maybe water under the bridge, I guess.
yeah. HBO is working on a project like the Band of Brothers for Civil War. And Tom Hanks and Spielberg are doing it. So it should be out by late 2012 too. And Paramount's working on a show too that'll be his Civil War related. So we're going to get a couple of decent shows anyway, as we work across. You know, we may have something in Quality of Glory in Gettysburg to be able to go out and see. Anybody seen The Conspirators yet?
I heard.
Seen the what, I'm sorry?
Extremely good. The Conspirators, it's about the Lincoln assassins
Oh,
and the trial of Mary.
Yeah.
yeah, I saw the National Geographic show that was like the week before, I think that actually went out. And all the reenactments obviously were coming out of the movie. And they told me the story. And I really felt like, well, I had to learn what I needed to learn.
You didn't even go see the movie.
I didn't go see the movie.
Yeah, I got to go to the premiere at the Fox. Got invited to go to the premiere at the Fox, so that was fun. Any other questions? I'm doing pretty good on time, huh? Just about perfect what you said, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
we never did ask Brother Newt Gingrich about where General McPherson was killed right in our neighborhood. My younger brother Wayne and I grew up at the Battle of Atlanta, in East Atlanta. We grew up on that site, and anyway, we never asked, found out whether Newt, his original name was McPherson. Hello.
Mm.
How about that? I wonder if. I wonder if that's his kin that, you know.
Yeah, he did write those.
I didn't know whether you looked that up or not.
No, I haven't seen that. That's funny.
Professor of history, professor of West Georgia College.
Yeah.
Newt McPherson Gingrich. Sorry, and then just.
That's good.
And you know, Miss, please, the first Alabama cavalry here.
Mm-hmm.
You got some names down here. It's almost like my brother Wayne and I. Waldreep, Resaca. Is this Resaca Cemetery? They were the 16th Army Corps escorts.
Yeah, they were what they were is they were men from out northern Alabama that enlisted, and it became the first Alabama Cavalry was U.S.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
and so they fought in a lot of cavalry units, cavalry fights, and up in Resaca.
Yeah.
And it was the second day, he was killed on the second day fight, and they were buried right south of Resaca,
Yeah.
about 2-3 miles south of Resaca.
Yes, sir.
What's really interesting is the men in the Union Army that were killed the first day of Resaca were taken to Chattanooga National Cemetery, and the men in the second day were taken to Marietta National. So you really get confused on that one.
Yeah, James has a Confederate ancestor that's in an unmarked grave up there.
You know, there's an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal within the last 2 or 3 weeks. I'm pretty sure that's where it was, and I meant to read it, go back and read it more carefully, and I didn't, and the next day's newspaper came, and I never did. But it was talking about, apparently there's some people who are apparently is dedicated to what they're doing. It sounds like you've been for years for what you're doing. And they were actually doing an investigation to figure out, well, how many people actually died during the Civil War in Virginia versus North Carolina and everything. Yeah. And they're kind of upset. The states are upset because they're afraid they're going to get bumped and they won't turn out to have had the most soldiers die in the Civil War. But they had a chart, they had a map in there of the Southeast. And I think it was Alabama. Of course, Alabama didn't have near as many people from Alabama that died in the Civil War as some of those, as North Carolina, Virginia claim, et cetera. But they had the thing I think was divided up, so they had 2 different colors for Union soldiers who died and Confederate soldiers who died. And I swear in Alabama they had more Union soldiers from Alabama died in the war than Confederate soldiers from Alabama died in the war. At least that's what I took that map to be saying.
Yeah, I think
I thought that was
well, it looked kind of
very questionable. I didn't know.
strange because, you know, you had the northern counties of Alabama that had enlisted, but you had the 1st Alabama Cavalry, and then you had 21st Ohio, a group listed with them, and there was no way with the massive amounts of Alabamians enlisted in the Confederate Army. Yeah. I mean, you take Chickamauga and Gettysburg, those casualties alone from Alabama would exceed the Union casualties from
That
Alabama.
makes sense. I thought that was really, I thought it was strange. It sort of jumped out, and I said, well, when I read the whole article again, I'll look at that map more carefully, and I never did.
I mean, because Longstreet's men, I mean, they hit Little Round Top in July of '63 and then got shoved against Snodgrass Hill in September of '63. And I mean, both of them, they took a beating in both battles alone. That was devastating. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I apologize for the first time attention.
Well, thank you for coming.
Oh, Mr. Excuse me. I have those articles. You want me to send it to you? Was that within the last 90 days, do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna look it up online. I had forgotten all about it until we got to talking. And I probably still got it at my house. I stack a book.
I show you that before.
I go back
Saturday.
to see anything out.
You know, when,
I go back 90
John
days.
D.
I got some. I got something.
Okay, thank you.
At 10.